You're listening to ARC.
You might have to put this seat back forward a little bit because you're also tall, but
I can drive with it.
yeah. What kind of place is Taung? What kind of people live here?
Taung is a rural place. Taung boasts a farming community. We have also a lot of livestock, a little bit of horses, and donkeys are all over.
Yeah, I've noticed that.
At first sight, it's not obvious why Bahidile Mike Dichaba's hometown of Taung is a good place to look for answers to some of the most fundamental questions confronting us as humans. But Taung is a layered place, a kind of microcosm, really.
Population here in Taung is predominantly Tswana, with a little bit of Xhosas, Zulus, and other tribes. People from Southern Africa. People came from as far as Zambia, Mozambique, Zimbabwe, Lesotho, I want to believe Swaziland as well, to come and settle in Taung.
As you're about to learn if you keep listening, all these people did not necessarily come to Taung to look for answers to fundamental questions. And yet, they're all connected, like Mike Dichaba and Taung itself, to the one question that only a human would ever ask. Where do we all come from?
Yeah, so this is a fundamental question that kind of sets us apart from other life on Earth, is that we really are interested in where we came from. And the answer to that depends on the timescales that you look at.
This is geologist Robin Pickering.
So you can have discussions with your family about where you as an individual come. We can look at historical records to tell where we come from. But what if we want to look back millions of years to answer this question?
Well, one place to look is in Taung, because right here, the entire history of humanity got rewritten. And that all started about 100 years ago with a bang. In the early 20th century in South Africa, this is the sound of fame and fortune. Rocks being exploded from where they've been sitting for millions of years. And if you're thinking gold mining, 9 times out of 10 you'd be right. But this is that other time, and this is a story about a different kind of treasure. One of the most important scientific discoveries ever made. The skull of a 3-year-old, the fossilized head of a small human-like child that would place South Africa as the birthplace of humanity and rewrite evolutionary history. But it wasn't as simple as that, because the story of the Taung Skull is also the story of prejudice, fraud, racism, and a whole new way of understanding humanity. This year is the 100-year anniversary of the discovery of the Taung child. And this is a brand new series from us here at ARC, together with the Human Evolution Research Institute at the University of Cape Town.
The skull of an ape man, a child, does not willingly reveal its secrets to the minds and machines of 20th century man.
I quite expected that this would cause trouble because one was dealing with the history of the earth and how man came to be.
My name is Rasmus Spitz, and this is episode 1 of season 2 of the Unburied Podcast. It's the second season of this podcast, and while you can absolutely listen to this series on its own, it is connected to the previous one about the grave-robbing anthropologist Rudolf Pöch in a way that surprised me. But let's start at an abandoned mine in Taung, Northwest Province, South Africa. Near the village of Buxton, outside the town of Taung itself, a mix of old, dilapidated buildings and brand new ones are spread out below a band of cliffs. This used to be the Northern Limeworks mine, but that closed down 50 years ago. Now, thanks to the famous child, this is a World Heritage Site.
And here we would have probably seen then like smoke coming up from the kilns. We would see workers that are dropping rocks into the carts, maybe blasts in the background.
As Mike shows us around, we begin to imagine life here at a different time.
So it would probably be a lot more noisy than it is now.
Very much noisy.
When the 100th anniversary of the discovery was coming up, a whole group of scientists got together to discuss how to mark this historic event. And being who they are, they decided to create a special issue for the South African Journal of Science.
But we are academics, it's what we do is write papers.
And here at ARC, we read those papers and began to understand how wild of a story this actually is. So we linked up with the academics to tell the story of the Taung child, about how the history of all of us was rewritten, but also the complicated story of the man credited with the discovery. The scientific legend, Raymond Dart.
Yeah, so Raymond Dart gets the credit, absolutely. He didn't discover the fossil, but he did recognize it. He wrote the article. The status and the academic rewards were enormous. And he's completely, as an individual, completely dominated human evolution research in South Africa ever since.
Is it fair to say that everyone in this field who grew up and worked in this field has worked in his shadow?
Yes, I do think that is fair. So I think it's a completely disproportionate amount of credit and dominance that he had.
Raymond Dart is no longer alive, but his legacy lives on. And it really is impossible to talk about the Taung child without talking about Dart. His name is everywhere. In too many places, maybe.
He's there, but so many others are also there. He was only one of many, many flawed and probably heavily racist individuals working in the field.
This is paleoanthropologist Lauren Schroeder. And according to her and all the other researchers, the anniversary is a good time to move the spotlight a little. To see beyond the simple story of the great discovery made by Raymond Dart.
I think grappling with the legacy and the history is important, but I don't want to be in the shadow of Dart for sure.
But this requires some effort. It's Dart's name on the article in the journal Nature that announced the discovery to the world. And it's also still his name on a plaque on a rock in Taung that Mike Dichaba leads us to in the hills above the limeworks. This, the story goes, is where the skull was found.
It was shaped like a human skull, but so small in such a way that he could not call it a human skull because of the size was not even the size of a newly born human baby. It was too small for that.
I have this picture of me smiling and holding the Taung child as a young researcher in the field. Yeah.
When Lauren Schröder first held the Taung Skull, it was in the vault in the anatomy department at the University of the Witwatersrand, Raymond Dart's department. And the smile on her face was genuine.
I feel this way about most fossils that I hold. I feel very privileged to hold something that old. You hold it in your hand, you think of the time. You think of just how long it took to get into your hand. And that is really, it's sort of mind-blowing in a way. The Taung child is special, not just because, it was the first early human ancestor found in South Africa, but it's also extremely beautiful. Aesthetically, it's shiny. The endocast shines, it sparkles. So it's really quite an amazing looking fossil.
Did you know this whole history, the whole story, that's the one you're talking about? Did you know that at that time?
No, I did not. Paleoanthropology has only recently started grappling with its dark history.
We'll try to get there, to tell the whole story. And for that, we need to go back to the beginning, which for the Taung child also happened to be the end.
So Australopithecus is small-bodied. They are what's called a gracile Australopithecine.
This is Stephanie Baker, another of the authors of the special issue on the Taung child.
It's estimated to be at around 3.2 to 3.4 years old when it died. They are small though. They are very little. So they're around about a meter tall at full growth. A meter to 1.2 meters tall. They'd be somewhere in the neighborhood of about 25 kilograms. So not big. So you imagine a small little baby one. He's a little guy.
From dating the layers of rock the fossil was discovered in, we know that our little relative died around 2.6 to 3 million years ago. And from dental evidence, we know approximately how old the child was too.
So the Taung child was at an age where it would have been fairly well weaned. And that means that it's at that point where it's starting to explore longer distances away from mom. It's now foraging on its own. It's now trying to source and explore and walk.
These days, Taung is fairly dry, hot in the summer and cold in the winter. Their cars traffic humans, and most of the animals you see are domesticated, like the donkeys. Not so back then. Here's Robin Pickering.
From the rocks around the Taung child, we know that this was a spring. So there would have been fresh water literally bubbling out on the surface. And along that hole, because there's an escarpment that runs all the way into the Northern Cape, and there would have been abundant fresh water, probably even waterfalls flowing down.
So it's wet, warm and green. And our little relative, who is 3 years old, is now steady on its feet. And alone. Or at least a few million years later, it is. Because no other humanoid fossils have been found in the area.
So it might represent that there weren't many pre-humans around on the landscape, or that maybe at the spring, maybe this was not a safe environment for them. Maybe it was somewhere where animals would come and drink and they wouldn't be hanging around.
Maybe the tiny toddler has ventured off on its own to a dangerous place at a precarious time. Here's Stephanie Baker again.
And it's that period, just on that weaning cusp for all animals, that you are at your most vulnerable to predation.
So you know that theory we spoke about yesterday, the theory of the Taung child being taken by an eagle, you know? So now when you're walking out here and you know there are big black eagles over your head somewhere, you ever feel that they might swoop down and catch you?
Not really. I'm too big for them. If they were to try that, I think a huge fight would erupt. Yeah, a huge fight would erupt where now there will be a man against eagle to say, hi, I'm fighting for my life and you are fighting for your prey. Here I am. Let's see who comes out on top.
These days, we aren't really prey for eagles. I remind myself this as a couple of black eagles soar above us in the hills of Taung. But for our distant relatives walking here 2.6 million years ago, it was very likely a reality. In his 1925 report to Nature, Dart describes puncture marks and scrapes on the Taung Skull, marks that later scientists would attribute to the claws of large birds of prey.
Where they'll come in with a back big toe, pierce at the back of the skull, and then push the front talons through the eyes and break through the orbital floor. So yeah, very, very fascinating. And to date, as far as anyone's been able to tell, the Taung child is the exception in that it is the only known hominin in the fossil record to have been predated upon by a bird of prey.
It's a vivid and terrifying theory. A toddler's skull penetrated by the talons of an eagle. But it is only a theory. The story could have been different if the scientists today had more than just the skull, which they might have had because Dart mentions other bones in his notes. But he focused only on the head, and today the other bones have been lost. In spite of 100 years and all the tools of modern science, there's so much we still don't know.
Do we have any idea how they would have, would they have had any kind of, how would they communicate? Would they have any kind of language?
We have no idea. No idea.
Okay.
But all animals communicate somehow. So they definitely communicated. Whether they had language, we would never know.
These days, there's only one kind of hominin around, and that's Homo sapiens, us. And that too was different when Australopithecus Africanus roamed around in what today is Taung.
We also know that there were other hominins on the landscape at that time. We also see the emergence of the genus Homo, so us, or our genus. So we see, for example, the first evidence of Homo erectus. So around the time of Australopithecus africanus, there were other hominins that started to appear.
So do you think that it would be possible, maybe not the Taung child might be too young, but to meet another hominin?
Well, we know for sure that at Sterkfontein, there seems to be evidence of both Australopithecus africanus as well as early Homo. We also know at many other sites in the cradle that there were that Paranthropus robustus and early Homo seem to be contemporaries with each other. So these are both what we consider hominins. They were both bipedal. So we have this evidence from multiple caves in the cradle of humankind that some hominins were living at the same place and the same time. So possible that they could meet some other hominins.
I find it difficult to imagine a world so different from the one I inhabit, with other kinds of humans and a much less secure place on top of the food chain. Here's Robin Pickering again,
And this is an interesting shift in research, because certainly Raymond Dart's early work was very much like man the hunter, and that we and our predecessors were these dominant creatures on the landscape and really like driving environments like we do today. But certainly today our understanding is that not at all. We were just another animal on the landscape. And there was also the kind of megafauna, like the giant saber-toothed cats, very big, bigger than modern leopards with big saber-tooths. There were more species of hyena than there are today. Even the dussies were massive. So it wasn't a very friendly environment.
So our little guy, presumably killed by an eagle or another bird, was perhaps not particularly unique in that sense. Its prominent role in evolutionary history may be more due to where the body landed when the eagle had its fill.
But then it is just this combination of often mainly geological coincidences that actually preserves this fossil. And that's why these fossils are so precious to us, because they are so rare. And that everything is like this Goldilocks moment. Everything has to be just right for them to be preserved.
So, when I think of this story, to me it's a quite gruesome kind of thing. But to you, it's also fortunate.
Yes, I have more than one feeling. I'm a parent, and I've had, my children are older now, but they were toddlers. And the idea of, an eagle predating on this little creature that's like, maybe wandered off, and their mom said, don't go to the spring by yourself, and then, but yes, for science, all the fossils are incredible that they preserved, and we have these moments that give us like this time window back into our own deep history.
Robert Ardrey summed him up one time in an introduction just saying, the man is a genius, which I know the dictionary says someone who has transcendental mental superiority, inventiveness, and insight. I think that sums up a very distinguished career.
The genius the speaker is referring to here is Raymond Dart. In 1973, Dart takes the podium at the Louis Leakey Memorial Symposium in California. He's mostly bald, with a prominent forehead. An elongated face and deep-set eyes give him an intense look, befitting a celebrated anthropologist. At 80 years old, he's at the end of a distinguished career, credited with the discovery of the Taung Skull 5 decades prior. The pinnacle of a career he never set out to have, as he admitted then.
I had no wish to be in Africa. I had no wish to be an anthropologist. I wanted to spend my life being a neurologist, learning something about the curious brains that people have and why they act in the strange manners that they do.
But he did become an anthropologist, and he did go to South Africa, specifically to Johannesburg, where the new University of the Witwatersrand, commonly referred to as Wits University, had just opened.
And there was a position open as the head of the Department of Anatomy. And so he kind of begrudgingly, put in an application.
This is Krista Kuljan, historian and author of the book Darwin's Hunch, a book about why scientists act in the strange ways that they do, to paraphrase Raymond Dart. But Krista doesn't look at brains to figure this out.
I spent a lot of time in the archives here to better understand how the changing social and political context over the past century has shaped the history of paleoanthropology.
The evidence Krista keeps finding in the archives show that science isn't some kind of pure knowledge separate from the world. It's also shaped by all the things that happen outside the laboratories. And this is very much the case when it comes to the story of Raymond Dart and the Taung child. And Dart's involvement actually began with a much less famous fossil.
One of Dart's students, Josephine Salmons, brought an ancient baboon fossil from Taung into class one day. And that fossil was also blasted out of the lime mine in Taung.
When Dart saw the fossilized baboon, he became convinced that there would be more interesting fossils embedded in the rock in Taung, which there was. Because eventually he found himself with a block of lime holding the key to changing evolutionary history, which he did not know yet.
He used his wife's knitting needles actually as a tool. And so he worked very meticulously on that. And when the rock eventually fell away and he was able to see the fossil itself, he knew he did have the skills to describe this fossil and send his journal article off to Nature. And it was printed relatively quickly.
Nothing counts in science until it's published in a prominent journal. And that's why it's February 2025, that's the centenary of the discovery. Because that's when Dart's article was printed in Nature, where he first told the world of the new species, Australopithecus africanus. It's wild to think that it only took Raymond Dart a few weeks to pry the skull from the lime and write his paper. Because he did not simply present the discovery of a new species to the world. He argued that the entire way we understood human evolution was wrong. That humans originated not in Europe or Asia as the going theory had it at the time, but instead in Africa. So I don't know what he expected when he waited for the response from the scientific community in Europe. But it's difficult to imagine that he wasn't very disappointed when the replies from the leading scientists in the field came through.
They couldn't imagine that Africa played a role in human evolution. So that definitely contributed to their rejection of the Taung Skull.
Dart's theory was dismissed, pushed aside for decades. And in the next 3 episodes, we're going to try to understand why.
They had it upside down. They went out to look for evidence for things they already believed.
Yeah, absolutely. They just use the evidence. They use science as a form of giving power to the stories.
But we'll go further than that. Because, as it turns out, Raymond Dart himself left something important out of the story.
The whole narrative that comes with that discovery, it makes zero mention of anybody else except for the colonial masters of the mining business, the people who were heading the department.
We'll also tell the story of how Raymond Dart was part of a misguided and terrible scientific detour that justified oppression and apartheid.
His ideas were specifically tied to understanding human evolution and studying living people as models for primitive ancestors. And again, we put primitive in kind of scare quotes. And that's exactly what he was doing. So he was very embedded in the race science of the time.
And finally, we'll look at how the science has changed in the last 100 years and what still needs to be done.
This wealth of knowledge, is it for us, the learned, or is it for us to share with the people on the ground? What are we doing to bridge that gap?
My name is Rasmus Spitz, and this is a production by ARC, together with the Human Evolution Research Institute at the University of Cape Town. This episode is written, sound designed, edited and mixed by myself and Neil Liddell, based on original research from the special issue of the South African Journal of Science, The Taung Child Then and Now, commemorating its centenary in a post-colonial age. Special thanks to Baidile Mike Dijaba.